Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Arkanasa Radio Studios in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James, and every time I start the show, I always say I need to redo the opening sounds, but I never get around to it. So, tonight, we're going to be talking about werewolves. Before I get going, a weird thing happened to me Wednesday afternoon. I received a package from China. Now, that's not so weird, but I don't remember ordering anything from China in the past 6 months or so. I do forget things, so I held the thin envelope up to the light. I couldn't see what was inside. My curiosity finally got to me, and I cut the very corner loose so I could peek inside. Still couldn't see anything. When I finally opened the package, it was empty. I ran the tracking number through DHL, and it said the package was still waiting to be delivered. So I called DHL, and they told me the same thing. Well, I told them I was standing there holding this empty package, and, well, I was told by the customer service rep that I should call the post office because they were the ones that had actually delivered the package that hadn't been delivered yet. So I called the post office. After arguing with the computer for way too long, like 20 minutes trying to actually talk to a human, I hung up. When I mentioned this misadventure to my nephew John, he said that I probably had gotten a Dybbuk in the mail. Oh, great. Some guy in China needed to get rid of his evil spirit, so he mailed it to me. Something along those lines. I did a check with my pendulum, and it just hung there, so I think I'm okay. Let's see what happens in the next few days, though. A sad news for you treasure hunting enthusiasts. Dan Blankenship passed away Sunday. He was 95 years old. The Oak Island treasure hunt won't be the same without him. A werewolf is a person who can take on the form of a wolf. Usually they run on all fours just like the animal they're mimicking. Then there are the wolf men, who have the attributes of a wolf, but they walk on two legs like a human. The name werewolf comes from Old English werewolf, which is spelled W-E-R-W-U-L-F, which means man-wolf. The word lycanthropy means wolf person. We get it from ancient Greek. King Lycaon was the ruler of a Greek city-state way back when the gods were less well-behaved. Well, Lycaon invited Zeus to dinner one day with the intentions of testing him to see if he was really all-knowing. Lycaon killed his son, Nyctimus, and then cooked him and served him for dinner. Those old Greeks had some issues, but then, back in the old days, things like this happened all the time. Herod the Great killed most of his own relatives, along with his son, so they couldn't take the throne from him. He was called the Great because he built a lot of massive buildings, not because of his nice personality. Well, when Zeus realized what was on the menu, he turned Lycaon into a wolf. Zeus also brought Nyctimus back to life and turned him into a wolf as well, so all of Lycaon's descendants would be wolves. In the story of Gilgamesh from 2800 BC, the hero of the story is traveling through the countryside when he runs into a beautiful woman who wants him to hang around for a while. Gilgamesh declines her amorous attentions after he learns that she had turned her previous boyfriend into a wolf. A lot of people being turned into wolves back then. Most folks don't think werewolf when they think about Little Red Riding Hood. Well, think about it. A human-sized wolf that can talk and pass itself off as being the girl's grandmother, and it wants to eat her. The origins of Little Red are hard to track down. There was a story from ancient Rome where the folks would sacrifice a virgin to a demon that had the appearance of a wolf. Each year they would choose a young girl and give her to the wolf demon, who would do nasty things to her before killing and eating her. After years of appeasement and sending young girls to their deaths, the hero comes along and he battles and manages to kill the demon. He then gets the girl as his bride. Instead of being a woodcutter, the hero of the story was a boxer. In France, they had a story called Les Petites Chaperones Rouges. Petite is French for little. A chaperone was a hat with a long tail that hung down the back, kind of like a cloak. And rouge means red. Once more, the story was this wolf dressed up like a grandmother and wanting to eat the girl. In the French version, the wolf gets what he wanted. He eats the grandmother and the girl both. The story was finally actually written down in the early 1700s in the Mother Goose stories as a cautionary tale on why you don't want to trust strangers. Well, then the Grimm brothers got a hold of it, and they printed Little Red Riding Hood. The entire story was the same right up until the wolf was about to eat the girl. That's when the woodcutter comes along and he saves the day. The Grimm brothers, or the Grimm fairy tales, were a lot more violent than the Disney version most people are familiar with. For example, in Cinderella, in the end of the story, when the prince marries the girl, he then has iron shoes put on the wicked stepmother and the wicked stepdaughter's feet. Then the shoes are heated up until they are glowing red, and the women had to dance to entertain the newlyweds. You never saw that in Disney, did you? A lot of those old stories had a lot more bloodshed. Well, actually, Disney never had any bloodshed. The old stories were violent, and people died in some nasty ways. The kids who watch Disney movies only know the revised version of these stories. Next time you watch Little Red Riding Hood, think about this being a werewolf story. The best Red Riding Hood story I've ever seen was called Hoodwinked. It doesn't exactly follow the original story at all, but I liked it. In the early 1500s, the world was a lot darker place. When the sun went down, just about everybody stayed inside because there were things outside that just might try to kill you. But the herds had to be taken care of. Usually this was the job of the kids. Anyone between the ages of 10 and 15 would spend their days keeping sheep or goats or cattle from straying too far from the farms. They were expected to stay with the herd as long as the herd was away from the farm, which might be all summer long. These kids would sometimes go missing. If a young person was killed or disappeared, it was considered just a part of life. But then, more kids began to vanish. For nearly 22 years, people were at a loss as to what might be happening to their kids. The town folks began to suspect foul play. They banded together and they began to patrol the countryside, trying to catch the perpetrator. One dark night, the townsfolk spotted a shadowy figure sneaking about the fields. They began to chase the unknown figure. After pursuing it for some time, the posse caught a man named Pierre Burgot, who was carrying the body of a dead girl. After questioning, probably accompanied by a sound beating, Pierre told his captors he had a partner in crime. The townsfolk went and arrested Michel Verdun. A lot of people think Michel is a woman's name. Well, in French, Michel is a man's name, just like Nikita in Russian. Just think Nikita Khrushchev. That will erase any thoughts of females from your mind. Too many songwriters used the wrong names, or they were singing about somebody other than what most folks thought. Well, Burgot and Verdun were treated to the local version of questioning. And keep in mind, the Inquisition was going on at the time. Both men confessed to killing and eating dozens of young kids over the past 20-odd years. Burgot said that Verdun had taken him to visit a group of warlocks or wizards. During the visit, the two men were told to strip naked and then apply a salve to their bodies. The salve caused hair to grow from every inch of skin. The two men grew long fangs and claws as well. They were transformed into wolves. The men then began running about the countryside, killing and eating anyone they could find. Once they'd eaten their fill, the men would transform back into their normal bodies. The warlocks had sold each man a jar filled with the magic salve that they would apply any time they wished to go on a rampage. Neither man had any idea as to how many kids they had killed. The locals that came forward to cast their accusations, saying their children had been victims of the men's activities, were somewhere around 100. Now, not every kid that went missing was at the hands of these two men. They did kill many children, and the remains of some were found near their homes. Both men were burned at the stake. This was the prescribed way of killing anybody that was not considered human. Witches, werewolves, warlocks, they all met with a fiery end. Using a salve was one way to become a werewolf. Then you might use a magic belt as well. Peter Stubb was a werewolf that lived in Bedburg, Germany in 1589. For 20 years, Stubb roamed the land, killing and eating men, women, and children. He was cornered one night after killing a woman. The people who captured him all said they saw him transform from a wolf to a man right before their eyes. During questioning, which was actually torture, Stubb said he had a magic belt given to him by the devil. The belt would turn him into a wolf, so he could run around killing anyone he wished. Well, Stubb was also burned at the stake, Just to be on the safe side, the court also had his daughter killed as well. Her being the descendant of a werewolf, they were concerned she might transform sometime soon. The story of a magic belt comes up in many other stories from way back. The human skin, to make the belt, was to be removed from its original owner while they were still alive, and during a very specific ceremony. Then it had to be tanned in a certain way, using herbs and minerals. The new owner would strip down to nothing and then place the belt around their waist. This would transform them into a wolf any time they wished. The ceremony, as well as the ingredients, are all kept secret, so don't ask. I don't think we need any more werewolves running around town. In Argentina, where a lot of folks speak German, gee, I wonder why. Anyway, in Argentina, they have the lobezón. In order to become a lobezón, you have to be the seventh son of a seventh son. But then there are some who say you only have to be the seventh son of a man with no particular number of brothers. On the 13th birthday, the lobezón comes to light and runs around the countryside killing and eating animals. No humans, just animals. Well, the farmers and the ranchers don't much care for having a son who kills their livestock off, so the boys tended to meet with an accident sometime after their 12th birthday. In order to stop the practice of killing off any number of 7 boys born into a family, the president of Argentina baptizes the boys and then grants them a special godson position. You don't get to live in the palace or anything, but you do get to live. Now, what with women wanting equal rights and all, girls are supposed to be eligible for the lobezón transformation as well. You might want to count your kids and see how many boys, or girls for that matter, you have, just in case. Keep an eye on number 7. Werewolves in Mexico are called nahual, which comes from an Indian word for warlock. A nahual can change into a black or very dark coyote, and they were considered to be very evil by the indigenous people of Mexico. It was believed by these folks that the people who were being attacked or killed in their village were being harmed by a nahual, and that it was also these coyotes that would steal the corn and chickens from the local farms. The nahual is protective of its territory. Any nahual that tries to sneak into another's turf is in for a fight, usually to the death. Any injuries sustained while in coyote form will be carried into the human form as well. So if you get a massive bite on your shoulder or your leg, when you become a human, you will still show the bite marks. A coyote and wolves are close enough to each other that they can interbreed. Today we have something called coy wolves running around Texas. It's half wolf, half coyote. They look like regular coyotes, only they're a lot bigger. According to old records, around 1640, the German city of Greifswald became overrun with werewolves. There were so many werewolves that they took over the entire city, making it unsafe for the people who used to run the place. The werewolves began working outwards from their principal area on Rockover Street. Any human who ventured out after dark was in certain danger of being attacked and killed by the large company of werewolves. As the story goes, A group of students decided that they had had enough of living in fear and staying indoors at night. They didn't much care for cowering in the night, trying to hold back the darkness and what was hiding in it, using as many candles and the fire from the hearth as they had. So one night, they banded together, and they led a charge against the monsters. Although the students put up a good fight, they were virtually helpless against the powerful werewolves. There's no report of how many perished, but it was a one-sided battle. The next day, one of the survivors suggested they were using the wrong kind of weapons. He said they should round up all the silver in town. Buttons and spoons and knives, any and all silverware from the homes in the town, even crosses if they had any. The silver was taken to the local smith, who melted it down, and he forged rounds for the muzzle loaders everybody had. Going into battle, armed with a flintlock, had to be quite a frightening proposition. You had one shot. The flint had to make contact with the steel and throw enough sparks to ignite the powder. There was a lot of smoke after each shot, and you just might miss. I guess being faced with a werewolf's claws would be a big motivator to squeeze the trigger rather than jerk it. Remember, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. Some of y'all will get that reference. Well, the next battle went to the humans as they tracked down all the hair-covered marauders and vanquished them. As the sun came up the next day, the humans were the victors. The main thing that came from the 1640 story was that you needed a silver bullet, usually blessed by a priest, in order to kill a werewolf. All accounts of werewolves before this said you could kill them with any means that would kill a normal wolf or man. And today, Hollywood continues this story to the max with just about every werewolf or wolfman movie. The silver actually makes a rotten bullet. The metal cools in an unsteady manner. As silver cools, you get heavy spots and you get light spots. This will give the round an unpredictable flight. If you're standing within a few feet, you might probably hit what you're aiming at, but beyond a few feet, you're toast. The Thies and the Bendanti werewolves, along with the werewolf witch trials, is an odd but interesting story. I read it several times before deciding that it had a place in the show tonight. In 1692, in Jurgenberg, Livonia, a very old man of about 80, named Thies, began claiming that he was a werewolf. This was beyond bizarre behavior because people were being burned at the stake for just such a thing. The Inquisition was spending an inordinate amount of time torturing people to get them to confess to being witches and warlocks and werewolves, and here was Thies admitting to being a werewolf without anyone even looking mean at him. Thies claimed that he and the other werewolves were not monsters or agents of the devil, but that they were the benevolent creatures of God, who he called the hounds of God. He said their souls would ascend to heaven once they had died, and they were in the favor of the Lord and worked tirelessly defending the souls of the earth with God's blessing of the gift of being a werewolf. The werewolves would bravely descend into the very depths of hell to do battle with demons and witches, fighting to prevent them from escaping into this world to wreak havoc on the earth. He claimed that when the hounds of God failed to keep the witches and the demons in their place, this was the cause for the bad crop seasons, drought, and starvation. On the other hand, when the werewolves were successful, the crops would flourish and there would be food for all. Thies went on to say, if it were not for the hounds of God, or the werewolves, the world would be overrun with demons and witches who would cause all mortals to endure unspeakable sufferings. Werewolves were the heroes of the land. Well, the judges were not exactly convinced. They didn't much like Thies's story, but no one had come forward to say their son or daughter had been killed by the werewolf in the past few years. Seeing as the witch trials had condemned children to be burned at the stake, letting an old guy off with only 10 lashes seems like nothing. Thies received his punishment and went on his way. Like I said, it was a weird story, but he did say he was a werewolf. The Beast of Javadon carried out in its first recorded attack in the early summer of 1764. A young woman who was tending cattle in the Mercer Forest near Langadon in the eastern part of Javadon saw the beast coming at her. However, the bulls and the herd charged the beast, keeping it at bay. They drove it off after it had attacked a second time as well. The beast went on to kill a lot of folks, mostly young girls and boys who were out in the fields. A good friend of mine, Ken Gerhardt, who has been on the show, investigated this story. I would love to get him on the show again, but the first time I met Ken was in Jefferson, Texas. I interviewed him for my book, Laredo Paranormal Research Society. Once I started doing strange things, Ken was the first name on my list of wished-for guests. I talked to him on a few times, but his schedule and mine just never coincided. Finally, I was able to get Ken one late night, and I recorded him talking about his trip to Belize, the books he's written, The Chupacabra from Texas, and his TV special about the Beast of Javadon. The TV show was called The Real Wolfman. Something went wrong, and the recording was lost. I got with Ken, and we tried to arrange the next interview. It took 1.5 years before we could get together again. Just before the second show, Ken told me that his cell phone was in bad shape. I checked to be sure we were recording, and then we did the show. When I played it back, Ken's voice was about half as loud as mine. I had to edit the show by cutting his voice track and mine into 2 separate tracks. I then had to raise his volume up while turning mine down at the same time. It took over 4 hours to get our voices level, just for a 1-hour show. So instead of risking any more bizarre activity, I'll give a rundown of his special. Ken and retired police homicide detective George Doucher were flown to France to look into the story. They had access to all the old records and folks who knew the story. They had assistants who would translate for them and arrange meetings with the locals. The History Channel was paying the bills, so the two could do the legwork. By digging through old accounts and reading old records, Ken and George came to the conclusion that the beast was not a werewolf, but a hyena. For some odd reason, the History Channel didn't want Ken to wear his signature hat, the black cowboy hat with the silver skull on the front, so instead he had to wear a black baseball cap. If you want to watch the episode, you can find it at www.historyvault.com/unsolved-mysteries-and-the-real-wolfman. I will put a link on my Facebook page so you don't have to guess at all those different letters. Or you can buy Ken's book and read the shortened version. Check out A Menagerie of Mysterious Beasts by Ken Gerhardt. I got my copy. In fact, I have every book he's ever written. I wish I could say the same about Nick Redfern, but that guy's written a lot of books. I think he's up to like 45 or 50 now. 1835, a group of American colonists led by Dr. Charles Beale were camped at Lake Espantosa, a renowned haunted location near what is now Carrizo Springs in southwest Texas. A half a mile from the Beale group, John Dent and his pregnant wife Molly Purtell Dent, both from Georgia, had built a brush cabin. It's just a tent covering stretched between trees and brush piled on the sides to keep the bloodthirsty critters out. Dent had come to Texas in order to trap beavers in the Devil's River area north of the present-day town of Del Rio. He was also on the run from the law for murdering a fellow trapper in Georgia. The Dents were to prove fortunate in their choice of site distant from the lake. A band of Comanches raided the main Beale camp and massacred most of the inhabitants, afterwards throwing the bodies of the victims and their carts into the lake. Even back then, Espantosa Lake had a reputation for ghostly goings-on. This incident only added to the store of ill luck and sorrow that was centered on what to this day the folks living in the area consider to be a haunted location. The name Espantosa means frightful. As Molly was approaching the end of her pregnancy, the couple were reluctant to travel despite the dangers of hostile Indians. One night in May 1835, there was a thunderstorm, and that was when Molly went into labor. She appeared to be having problems with the birth, so Dent decided to ride westward for help. He arrived at a goat ranch on the Pecos Canyon and told them desperately about his wife's condition, begging for someone to ride back with him. As the locals were preparing the horses to leave the ranch and follow Dent, there was a bolt of lightning and a crash of thunder right where Dent was sitting. He was thrown from his horse, dead before hitting the ground. After a considerable delay, as the locals all wondered what had just happened and whether or not they should go looking for the campsite, the goat herders mounted up and followed Dent's directions. It was dark as they approached the Devil's River, making the search for the camp near impossible. It wasn't until the morning that they managed to find the Dent camp. They could see the camp had taken a beating during the storm. They looked around for Dent's wife. Outside the cabin, in an open brush arbor, was Molly Dent, dead. She had apparently died in childbirth, but there was no trace of the baby anywhere. The child was never found, but there were fang marks on the woman's body and numerous wolf tracks over the area, which made the goat herders assume that the infant had either been devoured right there or carried off by the wolves to feed their cubs back in the den. 10 years later, around 1845, a boy living in San Felipe Springs, which later became Del Rio, told people that he saw a creature with long hair covering its features that looked like a naked girl. She was attacking a herd of goats. She was with a pack of wolves, and she acted as if she was one of the pack. A lot of folks all believed the boy was just making it up, but they did see the results of the wolf pack after the attack. The tracks, the blood, and mixed in with it all, small human footprints. The story managed to spread back among the settlements. News was hard to come by, and anything to break the monotony of day-to-day life was welcomed, and then it was passed on to the next neighbor. About a year after the wolf attack, a woman in San Felipe claimed she had seen 2 large wolves and an unclothed young girl devouring a freshly killed goat. She had approached close enough to the group to see that she was actually seeing what she thought was indeed a young girl and 2 wolves. She said the wolves and the girl saw her, stopped what they were doing, and then ran away. The woman noticed that the girl ran on all 4s, but on occasion she would rise up and run on 2 feet. She always stayed close to the wolves. The woman was absolutely positive about what she'd seen, and the scattering of people in the Devil River's country began to keep a sharp eye out for this wolf girl. There were similar reports by others in the region during the following year. Even the Apache would tell stories of finding a child's footprints, sometimes accompanied by handprints, mixed in with the tracks of wolves in sandy places along the river. After a while, a hunt was organized. They wanted to capture the Lobo Girl of Devil's River, as she had become known. This was comprised mostly of the vaqueros in the area. On the 3rd day of the hunt, the naked girl was sighted near Espantosa Lake, running with a pack of wolves. The cowboys managed to separate the girl from her wolf companions, and they cornered her in an arroyo. She fought like a wildcat, clawing and biting frantically to keep her freedom. Nobody wanted to get too close for fear she would bite down and not let go. They finally managed to lasso her to keep her still, but while they were trying to tie her up, she began to make this bizarre, unearthly sound, something between a scream of a woman and the howl of a wolf. As she howled, a monster of a wolf came running. It looked like the same wolf the girl had been seen with just a short time before. It was big, pissed off, and it was coming their way. One of the cowboys managed to draw his pistol and steady his horse enough to aim and shoot the giant wolf dead. As the dead wolf hit the ground, the wolf girl fell to the ground as well in a faint. The cowboys securely bound the girl before she woke up. They could see she was fairly healthy and looked like a normal young girl, if in need of a good bath and some hair attention. What wasn't covered in hair was caked in mud and dirt. Once the wolf girl was fully awake, the men tried to question her as to who she was and where she'd come from, but she acted as if she didn't understand a word in either Spanish or English. She could stand on her feet, but she seemed far more at ease on all 4s. She used her hands like forepaws. When bent over, she could move about like an animal, but then she could also stand up and run. and she didn't have a normal gait like a human. Even when on her feet, she leaned forward in a hunched position. They got the girl up on the back of a horse and took her to the nearest ranch. It was an isolated 2-room shack out in the desert wilderness. She was put in one of the rooms and then untied. The cowboys offered her some clothes to put on, but she acted as if this was a weird idea. They also tried giving her food and water, but she refused, cowering in the dark corner instead. They left her alone for the night, locking the door and posting a guard outside just to keep an eye on things. The only opening in the room was a small window that was barred shut. As night fell, the cowboys could hear howling coming from the wolf girl's room. The strange cries carried through the still night air. This began to unsettle her captors, and soon they began hearing answers from among the wolf pack in the wilderness beyond the shack. The horses began to act up, trying to pull loose from their posts. Soon, there were long, deep howls coming from all sides as the pack grew closer to the house. An occasional strange howling scream came from the girl as she answered them inside her room. Suddenly, the large pack of wolves charged into the corrals, attacking the goats, cows, and horses, and bringing the cowboys running, shooting and yelling, trying to drive them away. In all the confusion, the wolf girl managed to tear the planks from the window and escaped into the night. The howls soon abated, and the wolves snuck back out into the darkness. The next day, there was not a trace of the girl to be found. There were a few unverified reports in the following few years of a young, hair-covered girl being seen running with a wolf pack in the area. Nobody ever got close enough to make contact with her. Then, gold was discovered in California, and westward travel increased significantly. In 1852, a surveying party of frontiersmen searching for new routes to El Paso were riding down the Rio Grande at the bend far above the mouth of the Devil's River. They were almost at the water's edge when they saw, sitting on a sandbar, a young woman playing with 2 wolf cubs. She saw the men looking at her, quickly grabbed the 2 pups, and dashed into the brush as fast as the survey crew said anyone could possibly move. They were unable to follow her. The girl would have been about 17 years old by that time. After that, she disappeared into the wilderness forever. It is impossible now to know what became of Molly Dent's daughter, presuming that's who the wolf girl was. Now, she wasn't a werewolf by any stretch of the imagination, but she did behave like a wolf. She ran on all 4s. She attacked animals, tore them to pieces with her teeth. She was a wolf in every way but physical. And on that happy note, I am going to take a really brief pause to play a commercial. I'll be right back after this. Coffee makes the world go round. And around here, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. If you're not looking for coffee, try their tea. It's the best in town. And remember, life is too short to drink bad coffee. And I'm back. Gregton, Texas, sits halfway between Tyler and Marshall. It was the scene of another werewolf sighting. Mrs. Gregg said that one night in 1958, her husband was away on a business trip. As she decided to move her bed closer to a screen window, hoping to catch some cool breeze. There was a thunderstorm brewing on the southwestern horizon, and it was blowing from that direction. This was back when most houses didn't have air conditioning. To cool your house, you opened the windows and turned on a fan. Even my first pickup had 250 air conditioning. You rolled down both windows and you drove 50 miles an hour. Remember those side vent windows? Well, that's what they were for. Mrs. Gregg was laying in bed asleep when something woke her up. She thought it sounded like an animal scratching at the screen in the window. It was dark outside and even darker in. A flash of lightning illuminated the window. Standing just outside was a huge, hair-covered creature. It stood upright like a man, only the head was that of a wolf. The mouth was filled with long, white fangs. After the flash of light, the creature's eyes seemed to glow bright red in the darkness. It looked as if it had been trying to quietly pull the screen from the window frame. Seeing the woman now sitting up and looking at it, the creature turned and fled from the yard, running into a clump of brush. Mrs. Gregg leapt from the bed and grabbed a flashlight. She stood at the window watching for the animal to come out of the bushes. She was somewhere between scared stiff and amazed by what she had seen. After a short period of time, Mrs. Gregg saw the brush rustling around, and suddenly a man stepped out from the brush. He looked back and forth before turning and walking away down the road. It took most of the rest of the night for her to relax enough to get back to sleep. The number of werewolf sightings around the world is unusually high. In the United States, they spread out through most of the states. But there's one state that is ruling the list of reported werewolf sightings. Wisconsin boasts well over 200 werewolf sighting reports. This doesn't take into consideration how many times somebody sees something that looks like a werewolf and decides it's best not to tell anyone. The sightings date back as far as 1936, when a hairy 6-foot-tall creature with a wolf-like face and the odor of decaying meat was spotted digging in an old Indian burial ground near Jefferson, Wisconsin. Since then, Wisconsin has continuously ranked highest in first-hand werewolf reports and encounters. Wisconsin accounts for some of the country's most famous sightings, such as the infamous Beast of Bray Road, which dates back to 1949. While many recent sightings clearly describe werewolves, others seem to be more closely resembling a Bigfoot-type creature. A 26-year-old T.I. told Cryptozoology News that she was driving her son to her mother's house when she encountered the creature in 2017. She said, "There are a lot of woods there. I was about to get out of the car. Looking to the right, I saw what looked like a wolf, but much taller. It had white or yellow eyes. This unusual canine howled when the woman got out of the car." She went on to say, "I grabbed my son and ran to my mother's door. As I looked back, the animal seemed to be gone, but while I was unlocking the door, while I was knocking on the door, I looked back again and I noticed something black running away. It looked quite angry. Mark Shackleman was driving east on Highway 18 near Jefferson in southeastern Wisconsin. Now, this was the event from 1936. This may be the first werewolf sighting reported in Wisconsin. As he was passing an ancient Indian site, he saw a figure digging in one of the mounds. He said he could see a hair-covered creature that looked to be over 6 feet tall. It was kind of ape-like and dog-like features. It had pointed ears that stood erect like a German shepherd. He said its hands looked kind of odd. On each hand was what looked like a shriveled-up thumb and forefinger, but then it had 3 fully formed fingers on each hand as well. Wondering if he'd actually seen the creature, Shackleman went back to the same site the next evening to see if the creature would show up again. Well, it did. The creature was making weird sounds like it was trying to speak, but using growls and snarls. Kind of like how a dog would sound trying to say something. Shackleman's son went on to become the Kenosha newspaper editor. The son said his father had the impression what he'd seen was somehow connected with some kind of a satanic event, as if the creature was from some dark world and was here for evil purposes. October 31st, 1991 at 8:30 p.m., a woman drove on Bray Road near Delavan, Wisconsin, which is approximately 30 miles southeast of Jefferson. She thought she hit something with her car. She felt the front end jerk to the side from the right front tire. The woman stopped her car and looked out the back window, trying to see what she had hit. In the dark light from her brake lights, she saw a dark, hair-covered creature with a huge chest racing towards her. She spun around in her seat and hit the gas, trying to speed away. The creature leaped onto the trunk of her car and tried to pull itself up onto the roof. Fearing what might happen, the woman jerked the wheel back and forth, causing the vehicle to swerve. The creature slid backwards off the trunk and disappeared behind the rear bumper. Later that day, wanting to know if she had indeed seen the creature or not, the woman returned to the scene of the attack, only this time she brought a friend along for security and to be a witness. As they drove up to the spot, the two women glimpsed a dark form that was huge, standing up from the brush off the edge of the road. This was all the proof that they needed, so the driver hit the gas and once again they sped away. Her friend was convinced this was not just some story, but an actual occurrence. A lot of folks say they saw a werewolf, and then some will say it was a dog man. What's the difference? If it stands upright like a human, with a head resembling a dog or a wolf, could you really be able to say for sure which it was? Dogman or werewolf? Whatever people are seeing, it is still some kind of a cryptid. Linda Godfrey is the resident expert when it comes to werewolf or dogman sightings. She was on the show back in March 17, 2018. Her latest book, I Know What I Saw, should be out sometime in July, so keep an eye out for it. If it's anything like all of her other books, it'll be well worth reading. In Henrico County, Virginia, Folks say they keep seeing a huge wolf with black and silver hair. It walks on two legs until it realizes that it's being observed. It will then drop down onto all four legs and run away. The witnesses say it moves a lot faster than they would have thought possible. Now, there are wolves in Virginia. The Forestry Service relieved several pair back in 2003. This could account for some of the howls being heard around the countryside, but it wouldn't explain the sightings of a wolf on two legs. The wolves were released about 200 miles from where the werewolf sightings have taken place, but then wolves do travel from place to place. I should get my nephew to go have a look. Or maybe not. I don't want him to get pounced on. A New York resident from Oneida said he spotted a humanoid with the head of a wolf. During the summer of 2017, a 16-year-old Indian said he saw this creature around 4:30 p.m. The boy described the creature as being about 6 feet tall, covered in black fur, with the head of a wolf and yellow eyes. He said it was a werewolf. The boy had been out in a field picking berries when he heard something moving through the brush. Thinking it might be a deer, he went to have a look. The boy says he observed the creature clearly. It was right there in front of him. Not knowing if this thing was safe to be around, he decided the smart thing to do was to leave. He said, "I didn't think about it anymore. I just started walking up the hill slowly. That's when I heard it coming up behind me. So I started to run as fast as I could. I reached my neighbor's open cornfield." He added that he and his family have also spotted UFOs every now and then in the area. Apparently, the creature didn't want to be in the open cornfield, so it stopped following him. Being Native American, you hear stories of men with the ability to shift into any animal. But this thing really scared me, he said. I haven't been back to that trail ever since. Canada has its share of werewolf sightings. Near Quebec is a park named Seven Chutes. An amateur photographer was out in the park snapping photos of the scenery. He'd taken a lot of pictures and then he went home to see how they'd turned out. As he was looking at his photos, the man spotted something strange in one of them. It looked like an upright creature standing by the waterfall, and it was looking directly at the photographer. The creature seemed to be holding something in one hand. This could be a Bigfoot, or it could be a werewolf. The details are a bit blurry, but it is definitely something alive standing there in the picture. I've heard more than one cryptozoologist say they reported Bigfoot could have been a dog van instead, and vice versa. What fascinates me the most about all of these sightings is there's hardly ever any kind of a physical contact between the beast being seen and the witness. Miss Gregg saw the thing standing at a window trying to open the screen. It should have just ripped the screen right out of the frame. Instead, it was trying to be stealthy and sneaky. The woman in the car on Bray Road, she said she hit the creature with a car. It tried to get to her, but she managed to drive away. In order for there to be a reported werewolf sighting, there has to be a person willing to tell what they saw. The creature has to be identifiable enough to know it wasn't just a bear. and the person seeing the creature has to survive the experience. This makes me wonder how many of the thousands of people who go missing each year are victims of running into a werewolf or a dogman, and this is the last thing they ever did. Each time I do a show on missing people, I wonder what really happened to the people who simply vanished from the face of the earth, never to be seen again. If it was a werewolf that killed them, there should be some evidence, blood and other remains. Don't forget, Thursday, April 4th, at the Edinburgh Auditorium, there will be an open mic event where you can come share your UFO experiences, or you can just sit back and listen to others. It's free to attend. All you have to do is just show up. It is from 6 o'clock till 9 p.m. On April 5th, the next day, is the Edinburgh UFO Festival. It will begin at 6:30 and run until 10:30 p.m. Come see the lighter side of the UFO experience. There will be food, music, and a costume contest, and much more. The free UFO Festival will be at the Edinburgh City Hall courtyard, which is located at 415 West University Drive. Oh, and the auditorium is right behind where the festival will be held. April 6th will be the conference, which will be held at 118 Paseo del Prado in Edinburgh, Texas. For more details, go to roswellbooks.com/Edinburgh. I hope to see you there.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, the same murder three? Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.